Right, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Proper Wellbeing Chat with your host here, Ross Gyrey, and my fantastic co-host and business partner, personal trainer, Mr. Ben Johnson. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm glad it was a shorter introduction for me. I think people hopefully know who I am by now. So yeah, let's get straight into it. What are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about the political differences between the English and French governments over the fishing restrictions.
No, no, no. We're really not. We're really not.
So we're talking about that one weird trick for weight loss that actually works. All right, so it's something that we've kind of been building up about over the last few eps, and today we're just going to go in with a bit more detail that's going to actually help people in a practical way. So if you're listening, you know we always get you to take action at the end of the podcast. It's going to be no different today, and we are looking at it from that weight loss point of view. All right.
But so today we're really talking about calorie deficit, and when people say calorie deficit, they often don't just mean just eat less calories. There's an awful lot more to it than that, isn't there? So we're going to be chatting about how you can maximize your calories burned without starving yourself, without focusing on the wrong things, to basically ensure that losing weight and what you eat is actually an enjoyable process.
Absolutely. And it's one of them, like, if you don't want to lose weight, that's also good as well, right? Just
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
don't listen to this podcast, maybe come back to it if you want to in the future. But if you're wanting to lose weight, like, there is ways to do it and there's ways to not do it. And we've covered that in other reps. All right. You know the drill. If you've listened to a few of our other reps, you know the crack with short-term cycles that everybody stays into. The way that you've been marketed in short-term cycles to make yourself feel like you need to lose a certain amount of weight real quick. Like, all those things, you know the drill, right? We've covered
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So we're going to go in more detail about the calorie side of things, and most importantly, how you can keep that up in a super sustainable way. It's got to be sustainable, right? And if weight loss is something that you're after, if weight is something that you've struggled with in the past, that is 1,000,000%, because you've been in short-term cycles. Like, there's
And
there's no there's no way around that, is it? Like,
yeah,
if you've
absolutely.
got the long-term things in place, it's not a problem.
Yeah, it just kind of happens anyway. And I want to just add into that as well about it, obviously if weight loss isn't your thing, absolutely fine. I'll skip this episode. This is very much for what the vast majority of people that we deal with look for. It's just that whole, I'm carrying a few too many extra pounds. I'm not fitting into my jeans anymore like I used to, and I need to get that bit of weight off. So, but I think one of the big things that people kind of focus on though far too much, don't they? They focus on that small stuff, yeah, and they don't really understand how fat loss works. That's what we're going to kind of dig into to start off with. They worry about whether avocados are good for you or whether you can be drinking cider vinegar or just cider. They don't put those big rocks in place first and foremost. And one of those big rocks is having the patience to stick with it. So I'm going to say to you, Ross, what does that patience lead to? What do you need to get going first and foremost?
Well, you need the patience because it's a trial and error process, right? So when we say about calorie balance and calorie deficit, just for those, if this is brand new to you, calorie deficit is eating less calories than what your body needs to make sure that you lose weight. If you're eating the amount of calories that you do need, that's calorie maintenance, you stay the same weight. Likewise, if you're eating more than what you need, you gain weight, that's called a calorie surplus. So now we've got a few like of the absolute basics out of the way. Patience is essential for weight loss, right? Absolutely essential, because only 50 to 60% of people get their numbers for weight loss right without a
Yeah,
trial and error process. Okay. A lot of people don't get it right. And that's because, just like generic calorie calculators for generic people, like, it will only help you so much. There needs to be a personal uh, time that requires patience for you to get your numbers right, whether you have to increase or decrease calories, whether you have to move more or move less, specifically for you. So where you may have tried calorie counting before, and it hasn't worked for you, or you don't have the time to calorie count. They're like the two main problems that we come up against with people who have maybe tried it in the past, or like just crazy busy, right? And if you've tried calorie counting in the past and it hasn't worked for you, that is because you haven't gone through this trial and error process. Okay, you haven't had the patience to go through that to get it right for you. And there is also a huge level of inaccuracy with calorie counting that gets better over time as well. Like you won't just immediately count everything spot on from day one and you're like an expert at counting calories. Like you're going to log the wrong things. That's totally normal. All right.
Yeah.
That second one, I can't remember what I said, mate. Do you remember, or do we just have to kind of forget that one?
Well, no, I was going to pick up on that, because I was going to say a lot of people will go online, won't they, and fill out their height and their weight and how old they are and all that kind of stuff, and some algorithm somewhere, and there's loads of these out there. There's loads of these different algorithms will tell them how many calories they need to be getting. But that idea, then, first and foremost, that's incredibly generic.
It's a
Yeah, that
ballpark
you
figure,
as
isn't
a
it?
person. It's absolutely, it's there or thereabouts. So never ever take that figure that is given to you as gospel. You need that trial and error process in there. And I think that whole logging process, I hate it myself. I don't do it all of the time, but perhaps it's worth mentioning now is that a lot of people kind of misunderstand or just don't get how many calories are in things to start off with, and they usually underestimate actually how much they're eating. That's one of that bits where calorie logging becomes hugely important, because you suddenly realize how much food you're actually taking in. But that wasn't the point that I was wanting to make there. Is that
but mate, you brought me back on track big time, because I totally remembered what I was gonna say, and it's that like I don't have time for food logging, right?
Yeah.
And this podcast isn't purely about food logging, but taking 6 months, which might sound like the rest of your life, it's so long, it's 6 months. Oh my God, I can't commit to that. Like taking 6 months to learn how many calories your body needs and using that 6 months to lose weight versus expecting weight loss in 4 days and being disappointed when you haven't. If you look at it over 6 months and find time to do that, that's going to help you massively. And for people who don't have time, right? If you've been struggling with weight loss for 5 years, 6 years, and you're not getting any better, that's another 5 or 6, 10, 20 years ahead of you, right? And you're telling me that you don't have time to commit 6 months. Like, which one is more time consuming? Another 10 years of struggling with dieting, or 6 months to sort you out for the rest of your life?
Mate, that is such an important point. Yeah, people say, I haven't got time to do this. It's like, well, just stick in that same cycle then. And like say 5 years, 10 years time, you'll still be here. It's like, how long does it take you to work out how many calories is in 50 grams of rice? Yeah, and how much does 50 grams of rice look like when it's on your plate? That's basically what we're talking about here, isn't it? It's not doing this for the rest of your life. It's about saying, yeah, I need, for example, 50 grams of rice on my plate for my meal. What does that look like when I stick it on? Is it 1 tablespoon? Is it an entire bag full? A lot of people have no idea. It's learn that process is what we're talking about. And then you can stop logging it, because you don't need to anymore, because you know exactly what 50 grams of rice looks like.
Exactly, mate. Exactly. It's one of them, mate, that in those 6 months, you learn your portion sizes that you need for your body too, right? So there's a learning curve of knowledge. There's a learning curve of getting more specific. There's a learning curve of it it actually just takes time to lose weight, right? And doing it properly is going to take time. But all those things are super time saving, even though it might be 6 months, it might be 4 months, right? Like if you're a quick learner, but you can't speed up the process of weight loss and get better weight loss, you can't. You just can't do that. You need to be losing about 2 pounds a week, give or take, right? And that's not today's podcast, but if that's the only nugget you take from today, like I'm absolutely on board with that.
So I think we've talked enough there about kind of that whole input process for now as well, but it's the other side of the balance equation, which is that calorie output. So what does that look like as well? Because that for me comes back to that idea of people focus too much on the little bits of information, those little changes that they try to make, and they don't actually have a huge impact on your calorie output. So break that down for us in a little bit more detail.
Right. Well, studies show that there is 100% correlation between people who stay in short-term cycles and don't understand what TDE is.
Yeah.
Right. 100%. Okay. All right. And if you don't know what TDE is, like that's probably the crack, right? So to help you all out, and this is going to be a game changer for you, right? So if you have struggled in the past, the next 3 to 4 minutes are going to be a game changer. So listen up and come back to this point if you need to. TDE is your total daily energy expenditure. All right. So they're the amount of calories that you burn every day doing you. All right. Going to work, walking the dog, eating your food, sleeping, walking, sitting, sneezing, weeing, pooing, whatever you're doing, it all is covered.
Moving on.
In your total daily energy expenditure. All right. But this is where people go wrong. All right. So when people are wanting to lose weight, they focus on going on a super strict diet. Yeah. Or what do a lot of people do? They go running or they join a gym or something like that. And that's all good, right? They are good things. But when I explain to you how TDE is broken down, you will be hugely surprised, all right? Let's break it down. TDE is broken down into 4 areas, and these are the calories that you just burn living your life, all right? So firstly, basal metabolic rate, okay? That's 75-ish% of your total daily calories. I'm going to slow this down a bit so you all understand. BMR, your basal metabolic rate, is essentially you just being you. Everything that operates on an unconscious level, i.e. breathing, blood flow, sneezing, like sitting down, like all these things that just happen throughout the day, sleeping. It's just the calories are burning over, they're ticking over.
Yeah.
Okay. Then
I think that's a hugely important point, mate, because that's just like 75% of your energy output is basically something that you have virtually no control over. Yeah, and we'll come back to a couple of points which you do have control over potentially, but 75%, 75% of your daily energy expenditure you have virtually no control over. Yeah, and we can influence that with a few approaches in the long-term approach, right? We can. But then we've got your NEAT, okay, which is non-exercise activity thermogenics. Okay, so that acronym. it's like non-exercise activity. It's going for a walk, isn't it? It's pottering around the house, doing your tidying up and clearing up. Thermogenesis is just a ridiculous word to use. It's putting on your hot pants and going roller skating. It is. It's literally just going for a walk. All right, you're walking the dog. You're not in a exercise session. You are just moving. You're walking to work. Yeah. You're walking up the stairs. It's essentially calories you burn from moving where you're not doing a workout, right? Let's keep this real basic. And that's 10 to 15%, all right? Then you have TEF, right? Which is TEF, your thermic effect of food. This means these are the calories that you actually burn to digest food as you're eating, right? So that the energy it requires to digest food is called TEF. That takes up 5 to 10%. But then this is where people go wrong, all right? Exercise, roughly 5 to 10% of your calorie output. That's it, right? Yeah. So what people do when they stay in that short-term cycle is they go on something super strict diet-wise, which really plummets all the BMR side of things and the calories burnt from NEAT. And they focus on exercise, which is about 5 to 10%. And you don't realize that there's about 85% of untouched TDE, essentially, like untouched TDE, that you can influence parts of. But if you focus on the 100% of TDE, instead of 5 to 10%, suddenly weight loss becomes easier, more sustainable. Everything is
moving the way that you want it to.
But I think that for me is one of the biggest problems that people have, isn't it? That they look at exercise and think, oh, I'll go to the gym 3 times a week. It's like you can influence your calorie output because you can always expand your calorie output, obviously. You know, if we're talking about that 100%, if that 100% of calorie output is, for example, 2,000 calories, which is probably on the high side, it's like by doing more exercise, you can maybe bump that up to 2,200 or something like that. But it's still a small percentage overall. And that's going to the gym, you know, virtually every day for an hour a day to try to get that extra couple of hundred calories burnt off. It just doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work. So let's have a little look then about that kind of the BMR side, because we did talk about that for long term, because we talked about breathing as being part of the BMR. Does it just mean that we've got to breathe harder? Is that a thing? Or does it mean there's other things? And for me, there's a couple of big ones in there. One is that kind of muscle gain. Essentially, muscle is much more energetic. It burns more energy. This is why bodybuilders eat so much, because they're carrying an awful lot of muscle, and that is metabolically active. So that is increasing your BMR. Is there anything else that we can be focusing on as well?
Yeah, definitely, man. But that muscle building is definitely something that will hugely influence your BMR. Okay, so muscle generally burns about 2 to 3 times more calories than fat. Okay, so if you're building muscle by doing strength training, that's going to massively help. And then eating a high protein diet alongside a load of vegetables, again, that's going to influence your BMR. It's going to influence your thermic effect of food massively, because protein takes so many more calories to digest than eating carbs or fats, for example. Right. And I'm not 100% off the top of my head, but I think it's about 15 times more calories. I think that's right. I'm sure it's 15 times more calories. I ain't got notes on that right in front of me.
I'm just going to jump in there, mate, because I was looking at this the other day. I think there has been some new work done on this recently, and I think it's one of those things now that isn't as high as we perhaps thought it has been in the past. So we do actually need to go and have a little look at this ourselves. But there was something around if you double your protein intake from the kind of the standard protein intake for most people, which is around like 25% of their diet. If you were to double that, it does influence your calorie burn, but it's in that kind of somewhere in that 50 to 100 calories per day bracket, which isn't as high as perhaps we thought it was a little while ago. So that's literally like hot off the press. I think it was Lane Norton was talking about it.
It'd be cool to see that. But eating the high protein diet, getting strength training, they're two things that are hugely going to influence BMR. Getting good quality sleep, again, hugely going to influence your BMR. Managing stress is actually going to be fantastic for you as well. But the main two are pretty much the high protein diet side of things and getting some strength training in there. But alongside that, something that we always recommend is daily movement. So if you're doing like 20 to 30 minute walking every day, alongside a high protein diet, alongside strength training 2 to 3 times a week, they are 3 things that are hugely going to influence long-term weight management. And if that is paired with a calorie deficit in the learning curve that we mentioned earlier, that is hugely going to influence long-term sustainable weight loss coming from a higher percentage of fat. So that will mean that you will suddenly have a sustainable fat loss plan. Okay, so all hugely important to put together there. So if you do need to go back and listen to that again over the last sort of 5 minutes or so, knowing me and Ben, it was probably 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was.
Go and check that out, take it in, make sure you hear that again, right? Because it's not go and take a pill and you'll lose weight. Go and drink this, you'll lose weight. They're things to set you up for the future.
Yeah, everything's coming together. I must admit, I think the notes that I've now put together for the end of this, I think we're probably need to wrap it there because that's taken us about 25 minutes to get to, and people are probably really bored by now. So let's just say
they love us, mate. We've had 50 downloads. 50 downloads. 50 downloads. Joe Rogan, look
crazy.
out.
Yeah, coming for you.
Coming for you.
So, well, I mean, we've talked an awful lot about the calorie output there. So that kind of wrap up, taking away what you need to do. Number one, increase your meat. Yeah, get some more steps in, get some more just day-to-day activity in. Make sure that you're maxing out on your thermically effective food, whatever that looks like, by getting a high protein diet in. But I've just mentioned, because we did talk about calorie input as well, that is equally as important. Logging your food. We've talked about getting that kind of calorie counting in place. And essentially, so this at the top of the program, people massively underestimate their calorie input. Yeah, so that's hugely important. But studies have shown this again and again. People who do log their food lose twice as much weight as people who don't log their food. So again, if you take nothing else away from this program other than log your food, you're going to lose twice as much weight as somebody who's not logging their food. There you go. Thank you very much.
And if you want to find the best version of yourself or chat about your organization improving their physical and mental well-being as one solid unit, check out our website www.aeonhaf.co.uk. That's AEONHAF for health and fitness. Check us out right there. We've got a new website as well. Like, we have to go click some buttons on that to actually get that up now, because
Get a wiggle on.
said it on a podcast. All our usual social media channels. And yeah, you want a little bit of coaching, you know where we are. All right. Don't waste any time. Today is the day for you to take action. Have a good one, folks.
Take care. We'll speak to you next week.